Welcome to the Send Talk podcast, your easy to understand guide to some of the most common queries we get asked when it comes to special educational needs and disabilities, or SEND. I'm your host, Vic Elizabeth Turnbull, and together with SENDIASS Manchester, the city's information, advice and support service for SEND, we'll empower you to make informed decisions for you or your child. You'll hear from the SENDIASS Manchester team, and also in this episode, a parent talking about their unique SEN journey and how things are from their own perspective. And they'll both join me online for a chat. Now, on to the episode. In this episode, we're talking about the process of applying for and getting an education, health and care plan, also known as an EHCP. This process is known and referred to as an EHC needs or statutory assessment. The two things are the same. We'll look at the process itself, some of the law and regulations that surround it, and a few myths and common questions that we often get asked. So, for this episode, I'm joined by Andrew Lomax. Andrew, what's your role at SENDIASS Manchester?
I'm a SENDIASS caseworker. I've worked with the service for about 10 years now, just over 10 years, in fact. I advise parents on our helpline on aspects of special educational needs and, where required, can assist on more complex matters. And this can range from telephone conversations about next steps right up to supporting parents at actual tribunal hearings.
So who's this episode useful for?
This episode is going to be useful for a range of people, or a range of parents and young persons considering a statutory assessment or an EHC needs assessment. So that could be someone coming into it for the first time, or actually someone that's actually going through the process at the moment. It could also be useful for those parents that have actually gone through the process and are talking to other parents about it and their experiences, so they could use this for reference.
So let's get into the details then. What is an EHCP?
An Education, Health and Care Plan, or EHC as they're also known, describes a young person's special educational needs and or disability, also known as SEND, special educational needs or disability. It will describe the help they will get to meet those needs. An EHC plan also describes any health or social care provision that's required. Education, Health and Care Plans replaced statements in 2014. EHC plans are legal documents written by the local authority and are for children and young people who need a high level of support.
You said at the start, EHC needs assessments, also known as statutory assessments. Does this mean the law is involved?
Yes, statutory means law, and there is law and guidance that covers the whole process. The main bits of law and guidance are Part 3 of the Children and Families Act of 2014, the 2014 Special Educational Needs and Disability Regulation, also known as the SEN Regs, the 2014 Special Educational Needs and Disability Regulations, we also refer to these as the SEN Regs, and the 2014 Special Educational Needs and Disability Code of Practice, also known as the Code of Practice.
Wow, Andrew, some jargony bits of law and guidance there. So what is an Education, Health and Care Needs Assessment? Can you explain that in a bit of a straightforward way?
Yes, it's an assessment of a child or young person's needs. It's also the first stage of the process for getting an EHC plan. It finds out what the needs of the child or young person are and what provision they may need. It's the process of collecting information by the local authority from lots of sources. It's also designed to look at all aspects of the needs of the child or the young person.
Okay, Andrew, that's really clear. So why might an EHC plan be needed?
So it could be that SEN support has been tried in school and it's very clear that the child needs much more support. It's important to see if existing support can meet need, and I'll explain a little bit more about why later. It could be a child or young person is struggling with their setting, or a parent or carer is unhappy with their progress. Maybe because the level of need is so high, the school is not able to put in the necessary support. It could be that the school are putting in support but need more funds or expertise, or that a special school may be better. It may be unclear what the child or young person's needs are. It also might be that they need more specialist assessments from maybe a speech and language therapist or an educational psychologist.
Andy, when can a request for assessment be made?
A request can be made at any time.
I don't have to wait until starting school?
No, there's no need to wait until starting school. The Children's and Families Act applies from birth to 25 years old.
I don't have to wait until the child or young person is a few years behind, or wait until a particular number of special educational needs support cycles have been undertaken in school?
No, there's no need to wait for any of that.
Do I need a diagnosis?
No, the fact that you need a diagnosis is actually a myth. The child does need to have a special educational need, but not necessarily a diagnosis.
So I've previously had a refusal. Do I have to wait 6 months before asking again?
No, unless the local authority have carried out an assessment and decided that a plan was not necessary. In this case, you must wait 6 months. There's another myth here. There is no legal requirement to show that a school has spent its SEN budget before an EHC needs assessment can be requested.
When can a request be made for an assessment?
Well, there's a myth that only schools can apply for EHC needs assessment. This is incorrect. The people that can apply are a parent, a young person, or a person acting on behalf of a school or setting.
Andrew, you just said about a setting. What is a setting?
So that could be a nursery, a school, a special school, or a college.
So moving back to when a request can be made, do you have any advice?
We often advise parents and young people to speak to the setting about applying for a plan on their behalf. The request has to be made in writing. We do have template letters that parents and young people can use, and also fact sheets explaining the whole process.
We will put a link to those in the show notes for this episode.
The whole process by law should take no more than 20 weeks. The key points are: you make the request, we call that week 0. Then, at week 6, the local authority needs to decide whether or not to carry out assessment. If a plan is not going to be issued, then the LA should tell the parent or young person within 16 weeks. This is from when the assessment was requested. So, if after assessment the local authority decides to issue an EHC plan, it will first send out a draft plan for the parent or young person to review and comment on. It should then send out the final EHC plan within 20 weeks from the date the assessment was requested. Another myth we hear sometimes is that parents are advised it will be quicker if they make the request themselves. This is incorrect. The timelines are actually set out in law and are applicable to all requests.
What if the local authority refused to assess or issue a plan?
Well, these decisions can be formally challenged by the parent or young person. There's actually a formal process that can involve mediation and can eventually lead to a tribunal where a judge makes that decision. This process can be triggered at the following points. If the LA refused to assess, this is at week 6, or at week 16 if the local authority refused to issue a plan, or if the local authority issues a plan but the parent or young person is unhappy with the content or the school or setting named in the plan, and this happens around about week 20.
You said before that when considering whether to make an assessment request, it's important to see if existing support can meet need. Can you tell us why?
Well, that's because when the SEN reforms were made back in 2014, it was predicted that most children's needs could be met by SEN support in schools, and this still seems to be the case. We're often asked the question, should I apply for an EHC assessment straight away? And sometimes the answer is, it's best to make sure that you have sufficient evidence first. In some cases, a child's needs are so profound that an EHC needs assessment is carried out immediately. But in most cases, the school will look at SEN support to meet need, progressing to an EHC assessment when necessary. This can be frustrating for some parents, but it does make sense. When an EHC needs assessment is applied for, the local authority needs to decide whether they're going to carry out an assessment. There is a piece of law that guides as to whether assessment should be carried out, and this law is from the Children's and Families Act. The local authority must consider whether the child or young person has or may have special educational needs, and whether they may need special educational provision to be made through an EHC plan. If the answer to both of these questions is yes, they must carry out an EHC needs assessment. Carrying out an assessment does not automatically lead to an EHC being issued. We tend to find that if the LA have not been able to see enough evidence that an EHC is required, then they can refuse to issue a plan. If the LA refuse to issue a plan, the parent can challenge this decision at tribunal, but the parent needs to show why it's necessary. The more evidence you have, the better, and this is why it's worth speaking to the setting before applying for an EHC needs assessment. If the setting carry out several cycles of assess, plan, do and review and have other evidence, the LA can then carry out a much richer assessment. There's more in-depth detail about this in our fact sheets. There's a link to those in our show notes, and they're on our website too. A common myth is that the local authority may not have to carry out an assessment because they don't think a plan will be necessary. It's important to note that at this stage, all the parent is asking for is an assessment, not necessarily a plan.
So assuming a parent has requested an assessment and the local authority have agreed to carry out an assessment, what happens next?
The local authority must seek advice from the following people: the child's parents or young person, the head teacher or principal of the school, medical advice and information from healthcare professionals, information from an educational psychologist, information from social care, any other person the local authority thinks appropriate, or any person the child's parents or the young person reasonably requests.
So the assessment's been carried out and the local authority decide to issue a draft plan. What now?
The main thing is the parent should carefully check the plan. This part itself could be a whole episode, but the main parts to check in the plan are that it accurately describes a child's special educational needs, that the special educational provision detailed to meet the child's needs is quantified and specified. We can give advice around this, and IPSI have some very useful resources in checking an EHC on their website.
What about the school or setting in a draft plan?
Along with the draft EHC plan, the LA must give notice to the parent or young person that they have 15 days in which to complete the following: make comments or representations about the draft EHC plan, request a meeting with the local authority to talk about the draft plan, and also to request that a particular school or institution is named in the final EHC plan. During this stage, the local authority may consult with schools they feel may meet need. If you ask the local authority to consult with a school, they must do so. They will not necessarily name that school in the final plan, but they must consult. It's also really important to understand you have the right to request a mainstream education. The only reason in law that an LA would not name a mainstream school is that the attendance of the child or young person will be incompatible with the proficient education of others. Again, there's more detailed information on our fact sheets.
We've done all this. What's the final step, Andrew?
Well, the local authority issue a final plan. Again, the parents should check through it carefully. If they disagree with the content or the name of the school, they can potentially challenge that decision. Parents have 2 months from when the plan is issued to formally challenge the plan, although sometimes it's a little longer if they enter into mediation.
We're going to hear from someone who's been through this process before. So, Andrew, who are they and could you introduce them?
The parent is Tanya. She's worked with our service quite extensively. She's been through the process before and she'll tell you about her experiences.
Tanya, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the SENDIASS Manchester podcast. So tell me just a little bit about you.
I'm a SEND parent carer to 3 amazing boys. One of those is now much older, so he's 21. And part of his journey was that he was quite badly let down by the education system. So then when my 2 miracle babies then came along, who are now 6 and 7, we knew that they were going to have difficulties because of difficulties they'd had preschool. So we were kind of armed and ready by the time we got there for the second run. And we thought we would have it all in the bag, if you like, and everything would be plain, smooth sailing. And then we got to school and it wasn't like that. I think one of the first things that the SENCO worker had said to me was that there was no extra funding for SEND at all. She looked me dead in the eyes and said this with a straight face. And that's not the case for every SEND child, and that's not the case with every school. But unfortunately, especially in areas like ours, the more deprived areas, the schools are overrun, they're underfunded, there's millions of reasons why. But these children are being missed and they are being failed, and we need to change that. Every child should matter, not just ones in well-to-do areas or more affluent areas. So that is kind of where my SEND journey began, and that's what's brought me to kind of where I am today. So I do a lot of work, voluntary work at the moment with Manchester Parent Champions. I work alongside IAS, Manchester Parent Carer Forum. I do the volunteer line for IPSA, which is the independent provider of special educational needs. Wow. That was a lot. My remit is that I support parent carers in our local area to go through the SEND jungle, if you like, and get the way through that and try to make it an easier process for them and advocate for them where they can't do that for themselves.
So your experience has ignited your passion to then help others go through the same thing?
Absolutely. Having one child let down was one child too many. And because of the age he was at, he was later along the line, because I was very young when I had my older children. So in a lot of senses, I was quite naive, and I believed in the education system and I believed in the professionals in education and that they would do the right thing by my child. And unfortunately, that wasn't what was happening for him.
How did you feel when you knew that for your youngest two, you had to do it all again?
I was a bit scared at first, I'm not going to lie, because of the kind of response from last time. And then I have my own disabilities. So although my last two children are the most amazing wanted babies you could ever possibly imagine, having them took a massive toll on my body because I have something called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And I also have ADHD as well, but that wasn't so much the physical side, but the two pregnancies. Because after having my older babies, my older boys, I'd had a few miscarriages and was told that I would never have any more children. It was like all my Christmases had come at once, and there was no thought in there of what impact this was going to have on me or my body. It was just an amazing blessing, and I was soaking it up for everything it was worth. So it took a lot, and I was tired, I was run down. But I know, from my own experiences and my own learning from having, after leaving school, I was 16 when I had him. So I was very, very young. I was a care leaver. So obviously there were issues in my own family growing up. So I didn't have many of those positive role models around me. So it wasn't an easy job, and education can be a massively powerful tool. It really can. And it gives options to people that you could never imagine before. So for them, it had to be different, and it was going to be different. Even if I had to physically learn how to homeschool them children myself, that was what was going to happen. They are going to get those chances.
You're so determined.
Thank you.
I can imagine it's tiring, though.
It's exhausting. Disabilities can be a really negative thing, but for me, they can bring a powerful thing as well. And I think that energy that comes from my ADHD, when I'm able to focus that onto a particular thing, gives me that little bit of an edge against neurotypical people sometimes, because I'm able to do that quite quickly and take that on board and be able to bring it back and break it down, which I think is really important in the SEND system. It's letting people know that, yes, it's complicated. Yes, it's all about the law, but it breaks down to be quite simple. And that's what we need to be doing. We need to be breaking it down so that parents can understand it.
So your youngest two, have you gone through the EHCP process with them?
Yeah, so I have with the older one of the two youngest. So one has the education and healthcare plan, and one has an IEP and is on SEN support, which is the level below what you would apply for the education and healthcare plan for.
Tell me about that process then. Was there anything not clear to you as you were going into that process?
Yeah, if I'm honest, none of it was clear at the beginning, and I had zero understanding. I'd heard reference made kind of over the years to things called statements. So that was the old equivalent before the SEND reforms. But I had absolutely no idea whatsoever what one was, how I could get one, how we applied for one. And again, I was told by school and by reading school's SEND policy that it was the school that applied for the education and healthcare plan if they felt it was necessary. Now, again, that's completely contradictory to how it actually is, because the parent can request the education and healthcare plan. It doesn't have to come from school. So it was a whole learning journey again of, right, that doesn't sound right. I'm not really sure of this, but I'm going to find out. And that's kind of, one rainy afternoon, there was an inclusion conference in Manchester, and rocked up, absolutely. Pens, notebooks, sticky notes are ready. And that was where I first met Andy, so the caseworker from IAS. So again, we still laugh about it to this day, because there's a thing called the notional budget for SEN. Now, I'd gone in and I'm like, you've spelled that wrong. Shouldn't that say national? The advantage I have this time round is that we have the internet and Google and social media and all these wonderful things that open up a whole world of people to us and a whole world of conversations that we maybe wouldn't have in person. But there's something about it being available online and being able to dig in and dip out that makes it that much easier for me to get that information.
Was there any points that you weren't happy with when you got the EHCP? Did it accurately describe your child's need? Did you recognise that child that you're reading about?
By the time we actually got to applying, I'd done a whole load of courses, I'd done training, I'd been, and because IPSA have a whole resource section online, so I'd been through all their resources, checked against all the different points of law, because that's where SENDIASS came in absolutely really usefully, in that if I didn't understand something or I wasn't sure, I would email Andy or I would ring the parent line and he would break it down for me so that I could stop panicking and be like, right, I know what that means now. So by the time we got there, a lot of that input had already been done by me. So again, in terms of health, because this is why we thought that when we got to school, we would have an easy kind of time of it, was because we had the occupational therapy reports. All those sort of things were already in place prior to him going to school. So we had all these recommendations, and then he has the Ehlers-Danlos syndrome as well. So there was kind of physio reports in there, and then there was a specialist OT, because there was like 3 different types of OT reports. So one was for sensory, one was for physical, one was for fine motor and gross motor, then it's physio. So there was all this stuff there for them to work with. We were very aware that there was other stuff going on with him, but in terms of social communication pathways, you can't access them until the 5, unless it's a very, very severe kind of effect that's being had, and they're not progressing at all. So for us, because he was progressing, it was hard for us to get him on the social communication pathway and be seen before he was 5, so before he would have to start school. So what we tried to do was get the other things in place first, so that when it came to that time, we wouldn't be sent backwards 2 steps, because we would have already done all those things by the time we got there. So again, my son didn't start at a mainstream nursery. He went to preschool when he was 18 months, and he stayed at preschool until he was 5. So the school that we'd picked for him again was picked very much around his needs. So we have a Manchester address, but his school is classed as an out of area school because it comes under Rochdale, but it's a very, very small school with very quite small class sizes in comparison to the schools that are in the closest vicinity of our home. So there was a lot of work already done. It was important to me that this was all in place and that we were doing everything right. And then, yes, we got to school and it was done. But then still, there was, like I said, that day when I discussed it with the SENCO, she looked me dead in the eyes and said, there is no extra funding for SEND, Tanya. And I just looked at her and I was like, I don't think that's right, but I'll get back to you on it. And that's how I ended up at the inclusion conference, and that's where that started. But again, even for me, as quite aware of the system and of how the system worked, it's only because of the knowledge of the law and the SEND code and knowing how to trace it back to the actual facts of it that we got the education and healthcare plan that we needed. I think we ended on a 4th amended final. We'd had 4 drafts and then 4 amended finals before we got to an agreed stage, because again, it was a constant to-ing and fro-ing of the working document. And then I'd say, well, this isn't right. And they'd say, well, that's what it says. And I'd be like, but the law says, or the SEND code says. And again, I think I'd already prepared myself for having to go to tribunal. I didn't want to go, but I'd already downloaded the forms and had it all ready just in case we needed to go. So I think that shone through in those communications with the local authority that you're going to do this properly one way or another, and if you don't, then I'm quite happy to take you to tribunal to get it sorted, and I will win. I was 110% confident. So again, it having that knowledge, sometimes it's being able to keep that dialogue open. And I think for me, having that knowledge and knowing that I was right, it kind of stops it becoming personal. Because I say this to everybody that I work with, and the same with even when I disagree with them, it's not you personally that I'm disagreeing with, it's the answer that you're giving me. But it's not about us, it's not a personal thing, or it isn't for me anyway kind of thing. It's me getting the best that my child deserves and that every child deserves.
So has the EHC plan helped your son?
Yeah, 100% definitely. It was very difficult to hone it down, so to get it all fine-tuned, if you like. So we have a lot of issues with things like specificity, which is breaking down, quantifying and qualifying the Section F provision. So for me, when I'm dealing with a parent and a plan, my kind of gold standard is that we want to know how that will happen, when that will happen, where that will happen, in what ratio that will happen. So will it be 1-to-1? Will it be 2-to-1? Will it be small group work? Or will it be small group work or full class work? But either way, each tiny little bit of Section F provision should be that specific, that there's no room for misinterpretation, because that's where the problems occur. Because then we can be clear on what's written and we understand that. But if then somebody else, another teacher or even a stand-in teacher or a TA, if they misinterpret that in a different way, then they can argue that they're interpreting what's written down, because it is open for interpretation if it's not specific. But then we also, on the flip side of that, have known plans to be that specific that they're then hard to deliver. There has to be a bit of give and take from all sides, but that should always be in the interests of the child. You shouldn't be not delivering that Section F provision because the teacher's got a day off. That's not what I mean when I say there should be room for manoeuvre. It should always be in the best interests of the child, whichever way you kind of work that around. But unfortunately, time, money, whatever the reasons, it doesn't always work that way.
You are so knowledgeable about the law when it comes to this, and you've had training and you want to find the right answers and you've gone to conferences and all stuff like that. How would you advise a parent who's listening to this and thinking, I'm not that knowledgeable, I could never do what she's done?
Of course they can. If I can do it, absolutely anybody can do it, honestly. The best advice I can give you is to reach out, to get on social media, to get on the internet, to go on your local offer for your, ours is Manchester City Council, but whoever your council is, get on the local offer, find the support groups, get on social media, find the Send Parent Carer groups. There are hundreds of them out there. There is worlds and worlds of knowledge. And these people, like me, will absolutely, it can be midnight, you can post a question and somebody will jump on and will answer that question for you to the best of their ability. And even if you don't understand it, if you say, I don't understand, can you break that down a little bit for me? That is exactly what they will do. They will break it down and they will keep breaking it down until you understand it. Because we all want the same thing. We all want these positive changes. We don't want it to be a battle anymore. It's not fair and it's not right. And so we need to work together, all of us, because there are so many of us out there. And again, with SENDIASS, and we have Manchester Parent Carer Forum, and we have Manchester Parent Champions, and then we have Space Group. There are so many things out there. So even if one's not the right fit, even because like me, I struggle with in-person support groups and things like that. I just have this image of my head in people sitting in a semicircle and talking. So it's not really my thing. But then there are so many other ways and other things that you can do. And even if you've not got the time to get involved, even if you have nothing to give, these people will give back to you if you ask those questions. Honestly, they really, really will.
Tanya, it's been absolutely brilliant to speak to you. I'm just in awe of your dogged determination to make sure that your sons have an education. So thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been lovely speaking to you, and thank you for listening to me.
One last question for you, Andrew. What's your suggested next steps for our listener?
Basically, what I always say to people is, don't be a stranger. If you're worried about something, get in touch with the helpline. The most important thing is that they know what our helpline number is, and that they know that they can ring it any time to talk through any issues that they may have, and we can go through the process with them in finer detail. That's what we're there for. And I always say that to parents. I said, don't get to a Friday and worry all weekend about it. Give me a ring on the Friday morning, and we'll go through it, and you'll have a better weekend.
Andrew, it's been a great episode. I've learnt so much. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks very much, Vic.
Thanks for listening to this Send Talks podcast episode. For more detailed information about the topics we discussed in this episode, we have a range of fact sheets that you can download from the SENDIASS Manchester website. Simply head to sendiassmanchester.org.uk. That's SENDISS Manchester.org.uk. If you still have questions about your child or yourself, you can contact the SENDIASS Manchester helpline. Just leave your name and number on the answer machine, and we'll phone you back, usually on the same day, to listen to your queries and then offer you advice. And that number for the SENDIASS Manchester helpline is 0161 209 8356. That's 0161 209 8356. Or you can email the parents' inbox. That email address is parents@manchester.gov.uk. That's parents@manchester.gov.uk. Another great resource is the Independent Provider of Special Education Advice. They're also known as IPSEA, IPSEA. They have guides, a helpline and lots more. Just head to their website. That's ipsea.org.uk, ipsea.org.uk. And all those details are in the show notes for this episode. The big thing to remember is that you are not alone on this journey, so please do share this episode with the people, parents and carers who you think will find it useful. A big thank you to everyone who's contributed their stories and expertise to this episode.